never mind. Hi. Okay. So you might see my cat at some point during this presentation. Apologies if that happens, or congratulations if that happens. Yeah. Can you all see my slides?
Yep.
Awesome. So yeah. So this this talk is called "How to Suck at Coding but Still Be a Great Developer." Actually, I had to change the title of my talk because I actually presented this at RailsConf, and they were like, "That's potty language." Actually, I think I called it low-level language. So but then I changed it back for you guys because I think I like the original title. They both mean the same thing. So this is a talk that I've actually been developer for like 5.5 years, and this is a talk that like I have been kicking around for a really, really long time, and I realized that the title's a bit tongue-in-cheek. It'll make a little bit more sense as we go. One other thing I wanted to mention is that your miles may vary. What I mean by that is that this is very, very, very specific to my personal journey. Hold on, let me turn off this Slack notification. Sorry, 1 second. How rude of me.
I kept checking to see if those were mine.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, same here.
All right, 1 second. I'm just too popular. Anyway, my whole point was I'm about to talk about myself. I just said I'm too popular. Yeah, so this is actually a lot about myself, but maybe you can get something out of it because maybe you feel this way. This is, let me go ahead and make sure my slides work. Can you see this new slide? Perfect. All right, yep. So the title of my talk, again, how to suck at coding but still be a great developer. Hopefully you'll realize during the course of this talk that I have and probably still do suck as a coder, but I'm a great developer. So yeah, that covers it. So this talk, as I was getting into, it might not be for you. You might not be the right audience for this. This is something that I developed with Code Platoon in mind. People that are really early in their journey, just kind of getting started. What week are y'all on right now?
Week 3.
End of week 4 or end of week 3.
Okay, perfect. Yep, good time for this then. So when I say this is not for you, it's for 2 reasons. So maybe a lot of this stuff won't apply to you. But even if it doesn't, I still want you to listen and, you know, try to take something away from it, because I don't think that this, the perspective in this talk is really well represented. And the other reason why I said this talk is probably not for you is because I actually wrote this talk for myself when I was going through a coding school myself. I didn't go through Code Platoon. I didn't know Code Platoon existed when I went through my coding bootcamp. Actually, it didn't exist when I went through my coding bootcamp. But I would have loved to save $12,000. That's great that you guys get to do that. But anyway, I really struggled when I was going through my coding bootcamp. And if you're struggling, hopefully you can get something out of this. All right, so a little bit of background about me. So I started coding in college, but I didn't love it. I went to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, and when I was in school, I was an information systems major, and I was like, I had to take a couple of coding courses in college that were part of the degree program, but I didn't actually want to be a developer. And so, I kind of was like, okay, let me just, get passing grades in these classes. And I also didn't find them very enjoyable either. I went into my college courses with really zero knowledge about coding, which is, I know how a lot of people go into coding boot camps as well. And well, at least you guys have a little bit of prep. For me, I didn't have as much prep. Actually, I didn't have any prep going into my first courses. So it was a little bit difficult for me to interact with people that really did have more information going into the courses than me, because I felt like I got a lot of almost Stack Overflow-y answers in real life. I would ask a question and I would basically get an attitude back of like, this is really easy, you should know this. And I didn't know it, which is why I was asking the question. So yeah, that kind of colored my opinion of, coding, and made me not really want to pursue it. But then when I finished college, I was like, cool, now what do I do with this IS degree? And Google was like, hey, you should be a coder. Like everywhere on Google, they were like, you should be a coder. And I was like, dang, I guess I should learn how to code. So I looked at vocational coding courses. I looked up a vocational coding course, and that brought me to Dev Bootcamp. I actually finished in 2015. I started and finished in 2015. And that was like a really low point for me because I sucked at coding in Dev Bootcamp. Not only did I suck, but like demonstrably was not good at it. And like the way that they structured the course in Dev Bootcamp was, it was 3-week parts. But it was really cool was that they let you repeat the first 2 parts if like you weren't getting it fast enough. So I actually spent 15 weeks in a 9-week course, just because like I wasn't getting it. It wasn't clicking. And, you know, a lot of my classmates were like, hey, just wait for your aha moment. You're going to have an aha moment. It's going to click. You're going to get it. And I never had that aha moment. And I'm like, is this aha moment real? But like so many people told me that I was like, where are all these ahas? Where are all my ahas? I didn't get it, but whatever. I did end up finishing the course. But while I was in the course, I actually had somebody, oh, thanks, Rod. I actually had somebody that came through as an alumni, and he told me something that it sounded a little bit off-putting and hard to hear, but it was really, really good advice for me. He basically said, you know, you're uncomfortable learning in this environment, and that discomfort might very well follow you through the rest of your career. And he wasn't trying to say that to like discourage me or to tell me that coding wasn't for me. He basically wanted me to hear that so that way I knew that, you know, okay, great. We know that there's a problem. We know that there's this block, and it's just something you're going to have to work through. So again, it was hard to hear, but it was something I needed to hear because it meant that things weren't going to come easy, and I needed to learn how to adapt. Adapt and overcome, you know, work hard. So my next phase in life was at an apprenticeship at 8thLight. So 8thLight, like Tom said, we have a lot of Code Platoon former people. We have Scott from Bravo, Charlie and Carolyn. I forget what theirs was. And then somebody else. Oh, Ethan from another cohort. I don't know. We have a bunch. We're a very small company, but we're a consultancy. And the one thing that's cool is so you have your coding boot camp, and then I went straight into an apprenticeship. So my apprenticeship was 9 months. Apprenticeships are basically like on-the-job training before you actually get into do like the work of a junior developer. There's a lot of people that could just jump right into a junior developer role, but that was not me. So being able to go through this apprenticeship, which is basically getting paid to learn for 9 months, was really, really helpful for me. But even during my apprenticeship, I struggled. Like, this is the theme. I struggle. So I had a really hard time. But I was still learning, you know, and it was all for me, like my learning curve, like it was very, very gradual. And some people are just like that, you know, sometimes it's just like that. And so, you know, definitely if you find yourself struggling, there are apprenticeships, they might be a better option for you. But yeah, we could talk about that separately. That's not the point of this talk. So this slide is basically just to get you in the mindset that I am qualified to give this talk, how to suck at coding but still be a great developer, or at least, you know, the first half is covered. So maybe you're thinking, hey, you just have imposter syndrome. Hopefully you've covered this already, but imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and it has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Basically like, God, they're going to find out eventually that I don't belong here, that I'm not good at this. And I don't think what I'm talking about is imposter syndrome, though. So basically, there's a lot of people like me who would never accept that diagnosis. Imposter syndrome is absolutely a real thing. There are plenty of high achieving people who absolutely fit that bill. But there's also a lot of average achieving people, or like maybe even below average achieving people that want to learn, want to achieve, and want to like be good at their jobs. But there's, you know, the fact is that they're trying to tread water while others around them are swimming laps. I feel that constantly at 8thLight because I feel like, I mean, I'm sure every company is like this, but I feel like I work with the smartest people on the planet. And I always feel like, gosh, like I can't keep up. But you know, that aside, there's also like other issues that could be at play that make imposter syndrome, I think, not always the right cure or not the right word for things. Systemic racism, sexism, and classism are all things that could make a person not be able to be good or feel good at their job. But these things are all, talking about imposter syndrome or telling somebody that they're imposter, it shifts the problem to the individual. Sometimes people say that and they're usually always trying to be helpful, try to get somebody out of a headspace, but sometimes it's not necessarily helpful. Sometimes people just need to acknowledge that the struggle's real for them and that it is something that can be addressed. And I think once people say, okay, the struggle exists, what can we do about it now? But sometimes if you're just trying to hide the fact that there is a struggle in the first place, you don't move towards solutions. Okay, so this is a quote that I love. It's from the movie Ratatouille, and it's anyone can cook. And I like to repurpose this as anyone can code. I truly 100% believe that anybody can learn to code given enough time, enough resources, and enough drive. Sometimes people don't have those things. Sometimes they don't have the time and resources. Drive is really internal, but if you have these things, anybody can learn to code. And I 100% believe that. If I could learn to code, so great. How do we be less bad at coding? How do we suck less? So the thing to remember is that it's not an overnight thing. One of the key factors that I mentioned was time. In order to get better at coding, you need time and you need exposure. I've been in my job for 5.5 years and I'm barely starting to feel comfortable. I mean, I was starting to feel comfortable probably like 2 years ago, but there's still things like I'll go to talk sometimes and everybody's like nodding their head and like totally understanding what's going on. And I'm like, I don't know any of these words. Like, this is way above me. So like, you just have to be exposed to new things. And in order to be exposed to those things, it takes time. So, that's just a fact. Some people like whip smart get it on the first time. Other people, maybe it takes them a couple times before they understand a concept, which, you could still be great at your job. So don't worry about that. So also another important thing to remember is you guys are in a coding boot camp. Even if like you have a CS degree going into that coding boot camp, like no matter where your situation is, you're going to be a junior developer when you're done with this. Nobody is going to expect you to be able to perform at the same level as people that have been on the job for years. So like expectations are lower for you from the externally than they are for you internally. And that's fine. Like you can keep your high expectations for yourself, but just keep in mind that like you're probably not going to know a lot. You're going to learn a lot in this course, but you're probably not going to know a lot. And you'll realize that on the first day of the job. I'm not saying that they don't prepare you, but there's a lot to cover to being a developer. There's a lot involved. So just know that you're not expected to know everything coming out of this coding boot camp. You're expected to be able to learn as you go. You're expected to be able to be excited about learning for sure. But yeah, there is a nagging fact that the job as a developer is coding. So one question we want to ask is like, how can we get better? So I've been working with Platoon for a while, probably like 4-ish years, something like that. And there's a few fundamental things that I notice when I work with Platoon students. So I've been a mentor and a TA, had some amazing people that I've met come through this program. And no matter how good people are, there's usually a few fundamental things on day one that I always tell people to look out for. So the theme here is learning with time. So these are things that require time to master, but recognizing the problems early help us learn to build our skills as we get more experience. So let's talk about those. So the first one is learning to break down problems. You probably have all come up to this. So this is one I think is a really important lesson as a junior developer. It's not something you're gonna master by any means, but throughout this course, you're gonna get incrementally better at doing this. So breaking down problems means, into the logical steps that a computer can execute. So you wanna capture what problem it is that you're trying to solve. One fun thing that I do, or I used to do pre-pandemic when we were in person, is I run a meetup called Chicago Ruby, and John and Rod used to bring, or John, I guess, and Tom used to bring people to my meetups, and we did one called Chicago Ruby Hack Night, where I give everybody a challenge. So it'd be like tic-tac-toe, for example, and everybody will, everybody knows how to play tic-tac-toe in real life, but how do you get tic-tac-toe in the form of a computer program where you could make a move, you can decide who wins, you can play a new game. So all of those things involve like understanding what the problem is, tic-tac-toe, how to do it in real life, but then understanding how to translate that into computer code. So yeah, lesson 1. Lesson 2, learning to write maintainable code. So you can get away with not writing maintainable code and have code that still works, but it's going to make your life so much easier if the code that you write is predictable when you read it. You want to be able to, read through the code and understand what your program's doing. You want clean code with expressive names, so that way when you look at a method, it's a small method, and the name tells you exactly what that method does. So you know where you need to attack things when you have problems or when you need to add on to your code. You don't want to be tripping through your own code. So yeah, that's lesson 2. Lesson 3, reading the error message. So every developer, probably every single day of their life, is going to run into an error message, at least one. Some days that's literally your whole life. So the important lesson here is, error messages are trying to help you. You're in week 3. Hopefully you've already learned this message, or this lesson, but errors, don't be afraid of the errors. They're trying to help. Learn to read the error messages. It's something you're going to see for the rest of your life. So let's talk about if you're struggling, sometimes it might just be that you need to pursue a different way of learning. Class is very instructive in like lecture ways, but there might be other additional things that you can do in order to ramp yourself up. So let's talk about a few. So there's different learning styles that I'm going to talk about. One of them is visual. So visual obviously has to do with learning with your eyes. So this could include diagrams. If you went through college and did any programming college, you probably understand how to read through UML. If you didn't, then I would definitely recommend at least, reading a couple articles or a little bit of a background on UML, because you probably will see that at some point as you're going through. Cheat sheets are great. I use cheat sheets specifically for some tools that I just don't want to or can't commit to memory. There's a lot of information out there, so cheat sheets are always going to be helpful for me. Whiteboarding, everybody's virtual now. This is a little bit harder, but when you're on on-site, whiteboarding might be helpful for you as well. And yeah, red check cheat sheets. Yep. Videos are another resource. YouTube is great for things other than whatever the crap that YouTube has. I don't know. I haven't been on it in a while, but you definitely can find lots of coding stuff on YouTube as well. So another learning style is auditory, having to do with hearing. This includes podcasts. I am not personally a podcast person, but I hear there are some tech podcasts out there that people really like. Sorry, I don't have any recommendations. Videos is another one. Some of these are obviously cross-category. Meetups, I run a few meetups, so I will always try to push this, but meetups are another great way to learn and also network. And then lectures, same thing. Lectures could be like, I know I have a few people that I work with right now. They actually are like actively enrolled in CS degree programs in college too. So for them, like they really gain from being able to sit in a room and take notes and learn in that environment. Verbal learning has to do with words in various forms. So technical books is one that you're going to see probably around whatever offices you're working in. Reading blogs and writing blogs are both options in this category. There's tons of blogs out there. There's, you can go on Twitter and, figure out probably, or Reddit and figure out what, what the best ones are. Note taking, this one goes kind of hand in hand with some of the other ones. Like for me, I can't watch or listen to a lecture without taking notes. And if I just watched a lecture and like everything would go over my head, but I have to like just the process of taking those notes and writing them down, even if I don't go back and reading them, helps me so much. Preparing talks is another great way, because as you're preparing, you have to make sure that you are preparing for the questions that people might ask you. So you're learning as you're going, and it makes your presentation better as well. And then documentation is a good one. I'll talk a little bit about this more, but as you're, you have probably seen the Python and the JavaScript documentation by this point. I go through Ruby documentation. I work primarily in Ruby, and I'm there like at least once a week usually, trying to figure something out. Kinesthetic learning has to do with touch and movement. So tutorials, this is a good one. I actually took a weekend when I was in Dev Boot Camp. They were like, I think it was called like Make Something Beautiful week or something like, or weekend, where we basically just, were given from Friday until Monday. We had to present something on Monday, and I just went through the whole Bootstrap program, and I was like, okay, it was just like a walkthrough tutorial. By the end of it, I had Bootstrap down. We used Bootstrap on my current client project, and having spent that like 30 hours or whatever I spent on it, on this projects. So actually just making something. Hackathons are fun for some people. Oh, sorry, my internet's bad. So Zoom just told me that. Contributing to open source. Some people are more open to this. There's a lot of resources out there for how to contribute for the first time to open source. There's a lot of blogs, a lot of stuff on the internet. So if this is something that's interesting to you, it also looks great on your profile. And then katas and koans I'm going to talk about. So these are things that I've done at Eighthlight. They're actually ways to practice learning. So katas are a really good tool for practicing test-driven development, if you're into that sort of thing, or if you're, a future employer is into that sort of thing. You could actually look on YouTube for katas. It's like you'll take something like the Roman numerals challenge or coin changer or something like that, something that's easy, you know how to do FizzBuzz or whatever, and you go through the motions of test-driven development as you're performing this, usually in front of people. So that's why I said, they have YouTube videos of this, and there's usually some like weird techno beat in the background, but it's just people, they're writing tests, running the test is going to fail because they didn't write the code to make the test pass, going back, writing the code, rerunning the test pass. And then you go to the next, incremental step. So that's what a kata is. Some people like those. Some, if you're learning test-driven development, it's kind of a fun thing to do. Koans are, it's a interesting way of learning a language. Basically, it's a test suite. So you have your test suite, and each test is, it's kind of weird how they do it. It's like a riddle form. They'll be like, oh, how do you, I don't have a good example, and I'm not going to try to make one up, but it's basically like, how do you add? How do you divide? How do you, go like incrementally through like the most basic parts of the language? How do you get something from a user, in Ruby that gets chomp? How do you print something to a screen, etc. And then in order to get to the next step, you have to pass that test. You have to perform that action. And yeah, so that's one way to do it. The final one I'm going to talk about is social learning. So social learning can involve meetups, can involve hackathons. Study groups are great. Sometimes I've seen these on Meetup, but I haven't seen them in a while. But I know of a couple that were going on for Ruby. You probably can form a study group from Code Platoon alum. I'm sure that that's something that if it doesn't exist, it should. And then mentoring is a social form of learning. You're not only learning, but you're teaching and you're helping. And I love mentoring. It's like the best thing. And then mob and pair programming. You probably do plenty of pair programming in Code Platoon. It's a really great skill because you have somebody to bounce ideas off of, learn from. Yeah. So I'm going to real quick, again, I said I was going to talk about myself a lot. So here it is again, how I don't learn. Technical reading. I hate technical reading. I have like a bunch of books on this shelf here, and my eyes just glaze over. I just don't love learning through technical reading. But some people can just like pick up a book front to back, totally understand what's going on. That's not for me. Let's see what else. Lectures. I mentioned lectures before. Lectures are fine if I could take notes. If I'm not taking notes, or if I go to like a meetup and I don't take notes, I'm not going to retain a lot of that. Hackathons and pair programming, I'm going to sort of tie together. The reason that these ones don't work well for me, like I said, pair programming is great and it's a great way to learn. But for me, pair programming is a very like social anxiety thing for me. Like I always get really anxious. I start sweating. And then like, if I'm in person, I'm like, can this person smell my sweat? Like what's going on? And I'm just worried about like my body the entire time. And I have a really hard time like performing in front of people when it comes to pair programming and mob programming and all that stuff. That's kind of why I don't do the hack nights right now as a virtual format, but those should be coming back soon anyway. But yeah, pair programming for me, not great, but some people, it's amazing. This is all very individual. So ways that I think I do learn through tutorials, I already mentioned Bootstrap, blogging, Grown Face. Okay, so blogging for me, when I was in my apprenticeship, I used to have to blog 5 times a week. Like that was the goal that they made me do. And it was because they understood that that's how I learned. Like I learned great from blogging, but I hate doing it, to be honest. I've written one professional blog since in the time that I've been a developer, and it was really well received, but I just hate blogging. But I do learn. Mentoring is another one I mentioned, love mentoring. And then documentation. So one thing about documentation is that, you know, you have your documentation where you go and you figure out, you know, great, how do I, you know, parse an array or parse a dictionary in whatever language that I'm working in. But one thing I really like about documentation is that you can also write documentation. Maybe you're not writing Python documentation, but you could write documentation about like the processes at your job, or maybe you're onboarding and you're using a new tool and the tool doesn't have a README. That's like perfect day one. Like, you know, even if they have good documentation, a lot of times like the tools that they're using or the dependencies that they're using are out of date, or maybe there's warnings or something that you're not going through, or something on your system, like you have a new OS X version or whatever, and or you're using OS X when it was originally, you know, built for Windows or whatever. Being able to go through and like write down the steps and the things that you had to do in order to make a program run is always valuable. So one other thing that I'm going to mention is expose your ignorance. This is something that I learned this is a phrase that I learned when I was in my coding boot camp. Basically means ask questions. You know, don't struggle in silence. We've all been where you are. This is kind of a great thing about being a developer is, one, you get paid a ton. Like I get paid more now than like I've ever been paid in my life. And I don't feel like I work harder, but that's really cool. But that's an aside. So the other thing is that, you know, the environment of being a developer is usually really, really helpful. So they're like, especially like, you know, coming from my experience in my apprenticeship, when I went through my apprenticeship, I had so many people there to support me and help me learn. And now, you know, having gone through, you know, in my coding bootcamp too, you know, I had alumni that would come in and mentor and tutor, and, you know, you have your TAs. And the great thing about that is that it's a community. You know, you have this Code Platoon community. I would highly encourage you when you finish this course to consider mentoring and consider TAing, because that's what really makes the community what it is, you know, you have people that go through the struggle, people that go through the program, and they give back. And that's really amazing. And that is all just to say that the people that are giving back are not, you know, they've been there. They've been on day one coding. They've learned from the start, and they probably have asked the same exact question that you're thinking in your head. So expose your ignorance, ask questions. We've all been where you are. One actually one strategy that I've learned, you know, as somebody who has always been afraid to ask questions, is I've learned to build allies. So in Code Platoon, it might be with a specific TA, or it might be with your mentor, it might be with another student that you feel comfortable with. But basically, build people where you feel comfortable to ask them questions and you don't feel like they're going to judge you, that you feel safe to ask those questions. But one tip here is, don't let this be just one person. Make sure you spread it out. But yeah, that's a good strategy. If you feel weird about asking questions, you know, build your allies. But otherwise, you know, the important thing about asking questions is that there's probably other people that are thinking about the question that you are asking. So that helps you, that helps other people, and it makes the learning environment just that much better. So here's where I'm going to talk about, you know, so maybe you're not a great developer, you're still learning, it's not going to be an overnight thing. So we discussed that, you know, you can improve your coding abilities over time, but time hasn't yet elapsed. So you're still not there yet. But the important thing to remember is that you absolutely can still be a great developer. The job is not just coding. Coding is a huge part of it, mind you, but people are going to make exceptions for you if you can prove that you want to be there and you have other things to offer. So that's really important to remember, that day one you might not feel like you're a great coder, but you still can succeed at this job. So again, I just want to remind you, this is very, very, very much tailored to me and my experience. You will probably have your own strengths and your own way to define yourself as a great developer, and that's great. I just want to get you to start thinking about this. So one thing that I was told after the fact that I wasn't supposed to do in the Marines, but I used to do all the time, is volunteer for a lot of stuff. And I know you're definitely not supposed to do that, but I did that a lot, and actually it worked out really well for me. I was in the Joint Service Color Guard at DLI. I got to release a dove at Clint Eastwood's estate. I got to do 49ers games, Sharks games, and just a whole bunch of cool stuff just from volunteering my time, spending obviously there's a cost to these things, and the cost is time. Right now I do this as well as a professional developer. I run 3 meetup groups. I run Chicago Ruby, People of Color Code, and I'm a co-organizer there, and another one that runs through by job called 8th Light University. It's a speaker series. And so obviously, I have 4 to 5 meetups a month. The cost is time again, and a little bit of energy, but you have to make sure that you're weighing what you get out of that as well. For me, being able to run these meetups, I'm able to, it's like an act of service, which is kind of my love language. So, being able to provide these services to people is really important to me. I also learn my network is huge right now. If I ever needed to leave 8th Light, which I don't intend to, but if I needed to, I know a lot of people and I could probably get a job pretty easily. Plus it looks great on my resume. So there's a lot of benefits to these things that just by volunteering, putting yourself out there, I'm able to advance myself because of that. So this slide basically talks about, while you're learning, you could still also contribute to being a great developer. A couple of ways, learning then teaching. So I already talked about, preparing a talk or blogging. Both of those things require you to sit down, learn, research, and then essentially you're sharing what you learned. So, however deep you want to get into it, being able to present it to an audience of, somebody that doesn't know what's going on, explain it to a 5-year-old, how do you go through these steps, even if it's something very, very basic, how to do, I think Git is a really good first blog because, you're probably really early into it, but, how to write a commit, how to, add, how to pull code down, it's a good starting point. Okay, facilitate learning. This is another one, hosting tech events. Every year there's this event called the Global Day of Code Retreat, and it's global. It's in 80 or something different countries. They host it, and it's the same day every single year. It's a Saturday, and it's a 6 or 8 hour, I think it's an 8-hour thing where you'll go through everybody works on the same exact problem around the world. And, it's a very social thing. That's a really fun thing to host, and you're always going to find people that want to go to that. So you don't need to commit to doing, to running a meetup event, but there are other things, even around work. I hosted internal conference, but you could do internal, lightning talks or something like that. So a lightning talk is just a quick 5-minute version of something that you learned, hey, I just learned about this new method, let me talk about it real quick, or whatever. It's kind of a nice way to get people that are not wanting to commit to a longer version talk, just to get a little bit of practice in. And then another way to facilitate learning, which I've already talked about, is adding documentation. Documentation, I love this. I always go back and read my old documentation because I don't remember even the things that I was learning, but yeah, that's very helpful. And then another way, which is, I've talked about this a lot, but mentoring. At my job, we take on apprentices in the apprenticeship, everybody's been an apprentice, you know, giving back to that experience for people. You can also mentor in the community. There's usually a lot of opportunities to do that. Even, you know, the thing to remember here is that there's always going to be somebody that knows less than you. You know, even if it's a kid, you know, you're always going to be able to find somebody that knows less than you. So you always will be able to provide some sort of value. Even if you don't feel like you know anything, you're going to know a little bit more than somebody. So yeah. And then this is the last slide, and I probably should make this into more than one slide because this is kind of the most important one, I think. But there are a lot of non-technical things that make a developer great that every developer should pay attention to. One, I think, is having a positive attitude. I pride myself on being a well-liked person on my team. You want to be the kind of person on your team that you would want, you know, alongside of you. So yeah, be a good person, be a positive person, be a good communicator. So, you know, there's a few ways to accomplish this. When you're not doing this yet, but eventually on the job, you're going to have pull requests where you're going to be reviewing code. Being able to go through that code and communicate like suggestions that you have for the code, or if something, you know, would work a little bit better in a different way, like understanding how to communicate well in pull requests is really important. Asking questions, which I covered earlier, is also a form of communication because by asking the question, you're enabling other people to learn. And then again, documenting processes that you find difficult, that'll help somebody as well. Being intellectually curious is a really good developer attribute, but it's a little bit hard to sort of tell somebody to be intellectually curious. It's kind of like telling somebody to be passionate, which, I mean, you either are or you aren't, but you can build up to that. So one way to do that is to increase your exposure to new things. For instance, you could spend a little bit of time every day reading a blog or writing code or something. Just basically like just make sure you expose yourself. And the more you expose yourself to, the likelier it's going to be that you build this intellectual curiosity. Being responsible is much more cut and dry than intellectual curiosity. Just do what you say you're going to do. Follow through, you know, be there. Being empathetic is more and more and more important to companies, which is great. So as you get on, you know, find a company, they're gonna, you know, there's a lot more. Sorry. So let me just start by saying that great developers are usually great people as well. I work with a lot of really, really empathetic people, and sometimes I don't get empathy well, but just by being surrounded by people who are like hyper empathetic, I'm learning so much. And you just want to be a good person because people are going to want to work with you. It's kind of like having that positive attitude. Great people are people who care about other people. And, you know, if you genuinely care about the success of your team, you're going to genuinely care about the people that are on that team. And then finally, being open-minded. So be open to new ideas, be open to learning from people around you. You know, don't just be like, oh, JavaScript sucks, or, you know, like I hate Node, or I hate Ember, or whatever. You know, just be open-minded, like give things a chance. You know, I hear people bashing PHP all the time, but it's a useful language, you know, and it's very prevalent. Just be open-minded to things. Okay, so finally, last point, preserve your sanity. So you're on your own journey. What helps you will be different from what helps other people. And what makes me a great developer is going to be different from what makes you a great developer. You know, maybe it'll be the same, but you know, either way, my point is it's an individual journey. You don't have to spend 60 hours coding. You don't have to spend, you know, 40 hours, 10 hours a week, you know, preparing talks or blogs. If that's not your thing, or, you know, maybe you have kids, or maybe you have life or whatever, you know, it's important, like give your all when you can, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well. Explore what it means for you to make you a great developer and practice that. So yeah, that's my talk. Thanks everybody. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer.
Awesome, Nicole. Appreciate it. Yeah. What questions do y'all have?
Stop sharing.
I don't know. Some of y'all have questions.
I will ask, when did you realize that you had, I guess, change your line of thinking if you needed to, in order to, I guess, adapt to
Well,
an
for me,
environment?
so for me, it was when that alumni came into Dev Boot Camp and was like, hey, like this is hard. Like, let's recognize that this is hard for you, so you can work past that. Like, don't just try to hide the fact that you're struggling. Accept it and then learn how to adapt to that challenge, so that way you can move forward. I thought that was really great advice, and that was kind of where it clicked in my head. Like, okay, stop feeling sorry for yourself and start doing something about it. And yeah, so that was kind of it.
Appreciate it.
I'm a great developer. I'll give myself that. I'm not a great coder still, but I get the job done. I've actually been with the same client for over almost 4.5 years right now, and they appreciate me. I'm not the best coder. I'm probably like mid-level, for in the scheme of things. You're not supposed to compare yourself to other people, by the way, which is a lesson that I will never learn. But yeah, I'm not the best coder, but I have a lot of other attributes that make me want to be, have these people want me to be on their team. So
Gotcha. Appreciate it.
yeah, no problem.
Nicole, could you kind of speak to your experience after you completed your code boot camp, how you felt, and like how was the job search process? Was it was it exhausting? Was it easy to find roles that you're interested in? And were you confident, I guess, leaving a boot camp that you knew the material, or were you still kind of like, I went through this boot camp, but I'm still not sure what I'm doing?
Oh, I was definitely I went through this boot camp and I still don't know what I'm doing. But the prospect of going to an apprenticeship was really appealing to me, because I thought that, hey, this is a great way. This is a company that recognizes that people aren't going to know everything coming out of a coding boot camp. Like, the fact that they offer an apprenticeship or an internship means that they know that you have a lot of learning to do. So that was really helpful for me. I think I also graduated from my coding boot camp at a good time. It was a couple years after Dev Boot Camp had started, so people were just sort of getting the idea of like what a coding boot camp is, what people coming out of the coding boot camp can offer. Y'all are in a much more mature post boot camp environment where people, there's a lot more graduates out there. A lot of times you're going to have, when people have hired a graduate, they're more likely to hire another one because they see what you can bring to the table. And there's a lot more exposure, out there. So, but for me, I really lucked out because there were a couple of people that had been hired by 8th Light previously from Dev Boot Camp, so it kind of worked out. They knew what to expect, and even if they didn't get what they expected with me, like coding wise, I still brought a lot to the table. So I know that they were happy they hired me. There's a lot of people on the screen.
I don't have any questions. Your talk was really great. You should do it again. I'll stay and listen again.
I'll do it next cohort. You can come back for that.